This is the John Oakley Show on 640 Toronto.
Whether you like it or don't like it, learn to love it because
Mark Carney is the Prime Minister.
No, there you go. That's how it would sound if wrestling and politics were combined. It's a mashup. Did they still use that term, by the way? Anyway, it was one of those things where last night left some people disenchanted. I got it. We'll talk about it a little later. There are folks for whom neither of the parties satisfied their aspirations or their desires. I've got to ask that question because I'm noticing the Communist Party, the Marxist-Leninists, they all gleaned about over 5,000, close to 6,000 votes.
The Libertarians.
Were in.
Thank you.
The Animal Welfare Party. I mean, you could look it up.
No more welfare checks for animals. I'm tired of this.
Yeah, you know what? That's the entitlement that's got to stop. We got to nip that in the bud. Because I see cats waiting around for the postman and, the check comes in and then you can't herd them.
Oh, just a bunch of lazy snakes, birds, and cows all on food stamps in this country. I'm tired of it.
Yeah, we're going to hell in a handbasket. My goodness. Well, listen, there are a lot of things that are bewildering and perplexing and we need to sort them out. This is the afternoon of the postmortem from the night before. And to that end, we're doing our best. Although we've encountered some people who are, how do I say this euphemistically, 3 seats short of a majority. By the way, the Liberals, now it's, Danny said it, it's with certainty that they've got a minority, 169 seats, needed 172. So there will be some power brokers in the House in the next Parliament, whenever that may be sitting. Jake Landau has joined us. He's a left-wing Liberal organizer who writes about all things in Canada that make him exhausted and sad. He's also author of Jake Landau is Getting Tired on Substack. Jake, I appreciate you joining us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, too. Great day for talk radio, John.
Thank you for saying so, Jake. I'm kind of curious. What is it that, maybe from last night's outcome that makes you exhausted and sad?
Well, as a Liberal, it's good to win a 4th term. That doesn't usually happen. But, if you're a left-winger, then it's a very bad time to be a left-winger, to be honest, in this country. The NDP just lost party status, and I don't know that it was because NDP voters necessarily don't like their policies. I think it's just more that people didn't like Jagmeet Singh. The Green Party is now, I've jokingly in the past referred to them as the Elizabeth May personality cult, but unfortunately that seems more true than ever now.
Yes, it does.
So Yes, we seem to have degenerated into a 2.5 party system. Credit to the Bloc Québécois. They lost a few seats, but they still exist as a party, and Yves Francois Blanchet kept his job, so good for him.
Well, they may be the power brokers. As I said, there's a minority now. We've had that confirmed at 169, so 3 short of. It may be, it may be the NDP rump with 7 seats. Minus Jagmeet, that may still wield some power, as they did in the last iteration, as you know. How will the Liberals then go about satisfying the erstwhile NDP voters? They say many of them just abandoned that party and came to the Liberal fold, which made all the difference.
Well, that's the interesting question, isn't it? Because ultimately, if the Liberals have 169 elected seats and the threshold for a majority of 343 is 172, then they don't really need to negotiate with the Bloc as much as they feared they might. They can get the votes they need from those 7 New Democrat seats, and Elizabeth May can join the party too. But and I don't imagine that there will be a confidence and supply agreement. I don't actually even know if the Liberals will lower the threshold for party status so the NDP can have it. I think the Liberals are just going to bargain on the fact that the NDP are too weak to go again for a while and go vote by vote.
That's an interesting one. All right. So they would still, though, play footsie with the NDP as they are constructed at 7 seats.
Yeah, it's and that is ultimately the reality of a minority government situation. They're going to have to play footsie with somebody in the House. It would, in this case, either be the New Democrats or the Bloc. The New Democrats are a bit friendlier but also the New Democrats, it may not necessarily go that way depending on what temperament they make. I think from the NDP perspective, the agreement and the collaboration with the Liberals, while it may have accomplished some NDP policy goals. It also decimated their party. And I mean, I don't like that, because I like it when political parties work together for common goals. That's good for the health of democracy. But if from the NDP's perspective, if that hurts them, then I think we'll see a lot more hostile minority parliament.
Again, with Jake Landau, left-wing Liberal organizer, he writes about all things in Canada that make him exhausted and sad in his podcast, It's Getting Pretty Late. I mean,
yeah, I got a naming theme going on there.
I was going to ask, I mean, it's getting pretty late. For what? Can you fill in the blank? What spawned that or prompted that?
Well, it's because that show I wanted to do on Sunday evenings, just because I know in Canada we don't have a lot of evening commentary or talk shows or stuff like that. We lost the Rick Mercer report a while back. I mean, in Quebec they have Tout le monde en parle, and that's great, but Anglo-Canada doesn't have anything like that. I don't really have the resources to make a television show, but a podcast anybody can do. Yeah, well, and I can do it pretty well.
Okay, well, I have no doubt, but you're right about that. Everybody's got a podcast, or will have at some point. The other thing, though, as a left-wing Liberal, you feel that the party's maybe, I don't want to say drifted to the center, but it's obviously worked. What would be the ideal for you as a left-wing Liberal? Where are they missing things now that you would, want to maybe backfill so that they're more of a left reflecting your sentiment, or your own?
That's a good question.
Yeah, go
and
ahead.
I think like one of the things I'm disappointed in is pharmacare. I know that's been a perennial promise through a couple cycles now, and I think in a system where we have public health care, and ostensibly this is something we've agreed should be at least somewhat government funded, it's kind of weird to say, okay, visiting the doctor is free, but the medication the doctor prescribes you isn't. And sometimes medication that people get prescribed is very expensive, and you don't really have a choice over whether or not you get to take it. And it gets really stupid when you have stuff like painkillers in a hospital setting are covered through OHIP, but when you then have to take painkillers out of the pharmacy at home, those you have to pay for yourself. It's stuff like that where you're getting it matters more than what you're getting. And I'm disappointed because, I mean, Mark Carney has pretty explicitly said that he's not going to be expanding anything beyond free diabetes medication and free birth control. And obviously those are good things. I'm supportive of those things, but that's certainly not the pharmacare that we were promised.
Well, all right. You cited OHIP, for example. This is where it's the Ontario government's responsibility to look after health care. How could the federal Liberals do a better job of maybe aiding or assisting in that case? Because it didn't become a major talking point during this campaign, as you know. What could the feds do about health care?
Well, that's a good question. And I mean, the answer is, well, you're right that delivery of healthcare is a completely provincial responsibility. There are aspects of healthcare that the federal government has their hands in already. For example, the federal government provides health transfers to the provinces. It's a carrot and stick approach where the federal government says you need to meet these basic minimum standards. And if you do, we'll give you a fair bit of money in order to help make your system functional. Now, a fair complaint that both right-wing and left-wing premiers have had is that since the Jean Chrétien era, the federal government has reduced those transfers, and that's meant that the provincial government has had to spend more money in that regard. So I think provincial governments do have a fair complaint that if the federal government is going to make pharmacare another requirement under the Canada Health Act that provinces would have to cover, that it would also be fair that the federal government would then give them a fair bit more money. But also the federal government has some fair complaints as well that when they give the provinces money for that, the provinces don't always spend the money on what the federal government gave it to them to spend on. So there's a bit of give and take here. And while, yes, it is a provincial responsibility on paper, the federal government does have the ability to give money to things that it feels is a priority. And if there are provinces that are willing to be collaborative with the federal government, I think it's more than okay for the federal government to give them money to address those shared priorities.
Well, we're going to find out. I mean, obviously, people will be watching closely to see what the initial moves will be that Mark Carney will make, and whether the Liberal government would make people whole in their expectations, given that, many voted, certainly in the GTA, and there is that aspect of things. But Jake Landau, I appreciate you coming on and giving us an explanation from the perspective of a left-wing Liberal organizer this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, John.
Always appreciate it. Jake Landau.